Aloha everyone and welcome to AO, Hawaii Experts Respond to COVID-19 Pandemic. AO was started because of the unique opportunity you gave us as a donor and a supporter of the Hawaii Resilience Fund. The resources you provided allowed us to engage and support our community like never before, to engage at a level to attract major partners to have the greatest impact possible. AO was started to provide you a lens into the work we think about and engage in every day. Thank you for that opportunity. Before we dive into our presentation, I'd like to recognize and thank our Board of Governors who are with us today. Our Chairman of the Board, Mr. Peter Hull, along with members of our Board of Governors, Jeff Arce, Debbie Berger, former Judge Michael Broderick, Roberta Chu, Tamar Goodfellow, Mike Irish, Dr. Tyree Jenkins, Kathy Richardson, Jennifer Sabas, and Leah Sheehan. Thank you very much for your leadership and for your support. As many of you know, HCF took a four-phased approach to addressing the pandemic. From our experience in working in past disasters like the Kauai floods and volcano disaster on Hawaii Island, we established MOUs with each of the counties that provided us a platform to immediately engage into supporting our community. Our four-phased approach starts with risk reduction and readiness, where we've invested nearly $3 million into the pandemic already, which is really focused on providing personal protective equipment to essential workers, providing quarantining resources to really try to compress the curve. Then on to rapid relief and response, where nearly $5 million of investment was put there. And that was really attempting to get resources into the community and those that needed it the most. We established a partnership with Bank of Hawaii and the City and County of Honolulu to quickly get more than $2 million of food into people's hands. And a lot of that coverage you probably saw on TV with the providing of food at the Aloha Stadium. And then to recovery and stabilization, which we've already invested about $3 million into that space. We hope at some point in the not so distant future, we'll be investing into the rebuilding of our community. Also into those funds that I mentioned earlier, the Island Resilience Funds, where the MOUs were established, nearly $2 million was invested in that space. And with the support of our board, we were able to align in additional funds from HCF's annual grant-making budget to align with our pandemic efforts. Just about every dollar that was spent was leveraged at a minimum of 2 to 1, and in some cases, 3 to 1, and in some other cases, even 4 to 1, with partners in our community, like the Castle Foundation, Stupski Foundation, private philanthropists, and county governments. When you add all of this up, you see the impact that your dollars have had in our community. When taking the leverage with our partners into consideration, it exceeds more than $40 million into our community over the last 182 days. If you can believe it, we've been at this for nearly 6 months already. We want to thank you for your support. We definitely would not be here without you. Before I begin, I would like to, with some of the information that is presented in today's presentation, some of it's going to be released in a public statement made by some of our public partners, specifically UHERO. We'd ask that you not screenshot any of the slides. This entire presentation will be made available early next week after they've made their information public. We thought it was important that we get you as fresh information as possible. We hope that you'll respect that request. And so now on to our guests. We're very, very fortunate to have two very esteemed leaders from the visitor industry, Mr. Elliot Mills and Mr. Jerry Gibson. Elliot is the Vice President of Hotel Operations for Disney Resort and Aulani, a Disney Resort and Spa. Elliot began his Disney career in 2010, helping to develop the culture and values that reflect Hawaii's community within the Hawaii Disney organization. Elliot is very active in our community and currently serves as a board member for the Hawaii Pacific Health, HMSA, Kapiolani Women and Children's Hospital, Hawaii Visitors and Conventions Bureau, and the Hawaii Community Foundation, of course, saving the best for last. And in 2017, Elliot was appointed to the Kamehameha Schools Board of Trustees. Jerry Gibson is Vice President of Turtle Bay Resorts, one of the most beloved resorts in Hawaii. He has 30 years of hospitality experience in Hawaii and lends his time and talent and expertise to a dozen industry and community boards, including the Police Commission, Hawaii Lodging and Tourism Association, where he was elected president, and the Hawaii Hotel Owners Roundtable, Hawaii Visitors and Convention Bureau, Honolulu Festival Foundation, to name a few. Elliot and Jerry will engage us in a conversation around the travel industry and what the future of travel looks like in the years to come. Gentlemen, again, I want to thank you for being here with us. And Jerry, I believe you're going to get us kicked off with what you hope you will see. Jerry's, I believe you're going to kick us off with what you are seeing in the state of travel in the midst of this pandemic. So Jerry, why don't you take it from here?
Aloha, thank you, Micah, very much. Appreciate it. And everybody out there today, it's kind of like the Perry and Price of Zoom today. And I hope you enjoy following along with us. But I think we'll start off with everybody's favorite subject in school, some statistics that are very relevant. And boy, we'll start off with December 31st, 2019, and oh boy, what a year it was. $17.75 billion in total visitor spend. The best that we ever did, as you can imagine. It was one heck of a year with 10,425,000 visitors. And that was, again, the highest that we had done ever in the state of Hawaii. We now have, unfortunately, 220,000 tourism workers that are not working right now out of 226,000. There is about 6,000 of us still that are working. If you take 220,000, think about the modern nuclear family of 4. Let's just make believe it's, let's just take 3 in Hawaii, even though it may be a little more than that. Multiply that by 220,000, that's 660,000 people that are affected by this. That's half of the population of Hawaii. So 50% of the families are directly affected by what we have going on today with the COVID virus. You take a month like July 2019, where that is, as Elliot will also tell you, that's our best month of the year. 995,000 passengers we did in 2019. In 2020, we just did 22,000, 98% less than the previous year. So some pretty interesting times that we're all going through. The average visitor spend for 2019 on their vacation here was $1,702, which is pretty hefty for any destination. So I just wanted to throw these stats out so you can kind of see where we came from and where we're going. In February of 2020, we were still showing 1.8% increase for the year, and that's over 10,425,000 visitors the previous year. Then in March, things started turning a little bit. In for the month of March, we were showing about 40% down. So that's kind of where we all began, and then there's a big story to tell after that, which we'll get into. One of the things I did want to show you that I thought you'd be interested in is the blended rates that we have in Hawaii for our hourly team members, and that's a shot below that you can see. And you can see the progression through the years from 2016 up to 2020. It's about 3% increase a year, which is pretty hefty. I can tell you that a bartender in a in a busy hotel, which 2019 and before, most of them were busy, can easily make over $100,000 a year. And a waiter, waitress in a 3-meal restaurant can take home a day consistently $300 to $400 a day. So these jobs are good jobs. And We obviously have a long way to go, and we're going to start talking about that in just a minute as we go through the presentation. Elliot, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, thanks, Jerry. And I just want to thank Micah and HCF for having us here today. It's a real privilege to put this presentation on for everyone. So next slide. Thank you. So this information came via way of HVCB, which both Jerry and I sit on. And we're just going to go through a few slides to just set up as far as what the traveler coming to Hawaii specifically is really concerned about right now. And as you can see, the top 3 to 4 bars here, upwards of 67%, getting down to 51% or so, is very personal in nature. Personal safety, safety of others, contraction of the virus, safety of loved ones as far as coming back with something. And then if you go below that, you see more of operational issues around flights, how to get to destinations, fear of getting stuck there, restrictions, and those types of things that are much more tactical than emotional. So if you think about that for a moment around Hawaii and why people are wanting to travel here or why they're not traveling here, a lot of it has to be mitigated through some fashion around providing a safe haven here in Hawaii, which we obviously had a few months ago. And then obviously creating a good vehicle for travel that is as safe as possible, or at least perceived safe, through some type of pre-testing work that we had moving along, and hopefully we'll have moving along going forward to mitigate that, so that we can obviously move those bars further to the left and have some confidence in the travel, and confidence when they get here that it's going to be safe for them and for their loved ones. Jerry, I'll take the next slide.
Thank you. And this is, what people are thinking about when they're prioritizing their travel for the rest of the year. And of course, loved ones comes up first, whether we're traveling from here or people coming to Hawaii. They're looking forward to seeing the loved ones, and that should be probably number one, which it absolutely is. And then the next one, I'm not going to go through each one, but getting away from crowds, that's interesting. A lot of people, I think there's a lot going on in the cities on the mainland, that kind of thing, and this is a recent poll, so I think that people are saying, hey, I would love to get away for a while and come to Hawaii and enjoy a little bit of a vacation. And then right up there too at 40% is budget travel. A lot of people are just taking off in their car, going camping, going hiking, taking a couple 100-mile trip and enjoying the mountains or the desert or wherever they're going to go. And that's quite a big sentiment. I was a little bit surprised at that one. And then if you go down to the bottom of the slide, there's 2 things that I thought were interesting was visiting theme parks and attending sports events. A little lower on the poll, but I'm sure everybody's dying to get back into those 2 experiences as well. Next slide.
So I just make one comment about that past slide just for a second that Jerry is going through. We've never seen, and we've been looking at these slides, Jerry and I, for years and years, and never seen getting away from crowds as something that popped up. So I think that's a huge win, I think, for us as far as what the perception of the islands are and could be. So I think that's a little bit of a positive coming out of the domestic U.S. Okay, thanks. Next slide. Here is a great picture of where we kind of see the market moving as far as intent to travel, getting on a commercial airline specifically. Obviously, we are. All the lift is everything for us, and getting the lift back here and having folks feel comfortable about traveling on an airline is critical for us. So I think what's important to take away here is, as we came out of summer, the deferral of this going into summer, that feeling of safety, that feeling of, yes, we're going to wait for a while here before we travel. And then once we get into the summer months, hopefully we feel comfortable with it. Things will be in place. We'll bend the curve. There potentially could be a vaccine, and we're going to get back into travel with a huge spike. I mean, this is a huge signal for us that we will most likely start to re-engage in some meaningful occupancy and airlift to the islands and outside of the domestic U.S. sometime around May. Now, I think we feel a little bit more bullish that if we did get a pre-test done and market it out, that this potentially could shift up closer, potentially into the holidays or into the spring break months. So there's opportunity there, I think, because there's a lot of pent-up demand, I know for sure, that is moving into the Caribbean and into Mexico because the flights to Hawaii are not there. So there's some potential there, but for sure there is a lot more confidence leading into summer versus the next 5 to 6 months, as we can see here.
Okay, and then, how safe would you feel traveling is pretty interesting. And, really, if you add the 60% that's unsafe and say the 24%, the 16.8 or 17% that are neutral, kind of a lot of people are thinking, I don't really feel good about getting on an airplane now. What's happening with the person next to me? What's happening at the airport? All these important things that people are thinking about now. But the sentiment just isn't real positive all the way around the U.S. right now. And so this is something that hopefully we will change in the months to come. Thank you.
I'll make mention one more thing that came up, I think recently, some of you may have seen it, but the CDC also put out a report, I think, this past week around flights and the safety of flights and air circulation. I think it's still being vetted through, but again, if that holds true where there is more risk than not, that's definitely going to play into this safety piece as well, which is, I think, is at the highest point in everyone's mind around taking a flight here to Hawaii. All right, next slide. Thanks to you here, and I think Micah made some mention of this slide in particular and the next one. So we appreciate your cooperation there with not sharing this beyond this presentation. But we're fortunate to see the latest and greatest slides out of you here around the future of our labor market and unemployment. There's three views here, as you can see it: the pessimistic scenario, the baseline, and the optimistic scenario. And in talking with those folks, I think, Jerry had mentioned that there's 260,000 jobs that's created by the industry, but the trickle-down effect that comes through restaurants, retail, vendors, activities, I think bleeds a lot deeper into the economy than most think. And I'm not sure if this is completely representative, but this is the snapshot that we have to work with. And I think also a big piece that plays into this is the runway. And obviously, we have moved our quarantine dates up month by month, et cetera. And what's happening that we can see, and Jerry can speak to this as well, is the confidence of our travelers to then rebook. So as we move people out of August, we try to keep them into September and October. As we've delayed it over 2 to 3 to 4 months, folks, as you can see on the past slide, are now saying, you know what, we're probably not going to rebook. We're going to wait for summer, or Hawaii is really not that at a place where we're going to open up this quarantine, so we're going to move that travel out a year. And it's unknown really when that business is going to come back. But the farther out we get, the less marketing we can put into the markets that serve this, with serve Hawaii, and not coming out with a true pretest or bending the curve here to become a safe destination. I think this view will take much more of a pessimistic line than not as we get further through the year and into potentially the next year. So this is definitely a sobering stat here that I think everybody is very aware of, and hopefully we can mitigate as we move forward here.
Yeah, I would agree with Elliot that over the top of this, I think there's actually another line. When you take a look at tourism's glide path and what it's going to be like over the next 2 or 3 years, and we'll get into a little bit of it later, it is going to be an extremely slow process. You have to remember that basically our group business is gone. The future pace of group is gone for the next couple of years. And as any hotelier would tell you, it takes these groups are booked many times, these large ones, particularly 4 or 5 years out. So all these are canceled, along with our segmentation with wholesale, et cetera, is basically bleak right now. So I believe that there is definitely a line above this pessimistic view, and it's going to take a lot longer, actually, to recover the markets. And will they recover totally? That's still up in the air yet.
I would add to that, Jerry, that if you stretch this graph out between 2020 and 2024 by month, I think the devil's going to be in the details as far as what that glide path looks like, how the business comes back, to your point, groups coming back, but even just our core FIT markets coming back in earnest over the course of the next 2 years, and what that looks like is going to really affect this graph a lot.
Yeah, good point, Elliot. And on top of that, every hotel is going to decide when they want to open. At what point are we going to open? So some will open maybe at 25 to 30% and may believe they do that. Well, there is a burn rate effect. So they're going to decide when the burn rate begins. And when the burn rate begins and they go through the burn rate to break-even point, that's a long glide path in itself. So every hotel is going to open up with quite a bit of red ink, and it's going to take a good long time to go through that burn rate and actually break even. If you look at most hotels USA, you would say that all blended together, you should be able to start to break even at 55, 57%. So if you open at 30%, you get challenges.
Yeah, so just to add this last comment to this slide, I would say that a lot of us are looking, frankly, to be just accretive in nature versus break even, obviously, because there is a burn rate continuing going on now as we're closed. And hopefully, we can get open and be accretive financially and bring our workers back and our cast members back in as soon as possible, given the market.
Elliot and Jerry, I want to stay on this topic just a little bit longer. I think it's a super interesting, conversation right now. Can either of you kind of unpack the primary metrics that you are looking at, so that we as a community can look at how we can coordinate better and accelerate that faster? So, when you guys look as industry experts and look at major indicators that tell you this is going to be a tougher lift than we anticipate, what are you looking at? What are the primary factors that you're looking at?
I'll start off. I think what we're all looking at, and the first thing that we're looking at is air seats. And we all know that we've taken quite a haircut with air seats. It's gone down from 13 million in 2019, way down. We don't even know where the bottom is quite yet. And nobody's going to swim here. So, that's obviously the first thing front of mind for all of us that we're looking at. And then certainly, what kind of demand are we going to get in the future, and where is it going to come from first? If you look at, for instance, and Elliot and I are both very familiar with timeshare. If all of you remember Iniki many years ago, and that was and Kauai got hit the hardest. The first thing that came back was timeshare. It's kind of a moat around the system, and people that own are going to say, hey, I want to get back there, I want to get back, I own the place, I want to be there. Those are the first that's the first segment that's really going to come back and be robust, in my opinion. So I think that segment will come back maybe next year. Will start to come back in a bigger way than certainly the straight hotel business. So that's what I would look at kind of at the beginning, and then look at certainly the demand curve as to what kind of group we can get, will the corporate group come back to us quicker than the association group, which it definitely will, and what do they look like at this point? Do we have the vaccine? Are we still social distancing? That kind of thing.
So Jerry, I mean, what can government do then right now that can help, bring more certainty around a faster recovery on airlift and say group travel? If you could point to one or two actions that you would want to see government take or even industry take in order for us to address that issue, those two issues.
Well, one thing we will have to do, and I think most people realize, is we're going to have to get back out and market to the world again. And a lot of the heavy lifting comes through the flags and the different hotels to do that. But we are going to have to spend money on that. So we want to make sure that there is some kind of well spent. First of all, that there's some kind of money coming into our coffers in order to do that. It's money well spent, whether we're going to Asia or to PCMA or whatever we're doing. It's very, very important that we have money to do just that, and that the Senate and the House appropriate that money for us. The next part, I think, is regulation. Help us with that. Help us with property taxes a little so we get back on our feet, that kind of thing. So I think those are a few of the immediate things that I would look at. Elliot, what would you look at?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Jerry, on those two pieces. I think in a more immediate nature, Mike, I believe that there's a couple of key foundational things that we have to do immediately to get us and reignite the industry. One is we obviously have to bend the curve here. We're all in this together. Our community has to come together to understand that we have to change behaviors in order for us to have a sustained management program around this virus. We're going to have to live with this for an undefined time frame here until we have a vaccine. That could be 12 months, that could be 18 months. We're not quite sure, but between now and then, we're going to have to reignite our economy. So that's the first and foremost, is get community to come together and mask up, social distance, and bend this curve down so that when we go out to the world and market, we are marketing a safe destination. And that's not what's being done now. In fact, we're on lists of other states for non-travel. And the second part of that program is really getting our community and sentiment back to support tourism to come back. Because as we're still stuck in this bubble, not managing the virus correctly, there is some negative sentiment of even adding more by adding tourism to come back. So that's number one. I think number two is we have to have some serious confidence and structure on our contact tracing process that's hopefully moving forward. And basically staff that thing up to 400 and 500 people to support not only our community effectively funded and resourced, but then support our tourism coming back in stages to ensure that we can manage that. And that means contact tracing, it means hospital beds, potentially leasing out some hotels in case we have to have that capacity. But we have to have the confidence in our community to welcome that back in. And then lastly, we need to have a pretest. Again, going back to gaining confidence internally by our community, as well as gaining confidence in our market and distribution channels for marketing to get people to come back and mitigate those big bars that I went over earlier to say that not only are we a safe destination, but when you come over here, you're going to be safe. And I actually think that if we differentiate ourselves in a marketplace that is, I think, does have demand, as I understand it, that we'll come out of this a little bit smoother and bring the glide path down a little shorter. But those are the key pieces. And then to Jerry's point, we need to get funded. We can't raid HDA's marketing fund going out as we have to actually come out stronger with marketing to get ourselves back on our feet.
Yeah, and on top of that, well said, Elliot. On top of that, a safe environment will bring our different countries back, like Japan, which certainly are most consistent and biggest spender. We want to come back as soon as we can. That's about 22% of the business to Hawaii at this point. Also, re-engaging with the airlines. I mentioned air travel and what we'll need for seats and that kind of thing. But I think it's really important that that we as an industry re-engage with the airline and make sure they know how important they are to this destination, and that we use whatever leverage we can to get those seats back into Hawaii. That's first and foremost.
And I'll mention one last thing. Before, I know we stayed on the slide a long time, but I believe that we got ourselves in a little bit of a situation with the transient vacation rentals, non-hosted. I think that is something that we're going to have to manage because obviously if we're going to be doing contact tracing, if we want to change sentiment in the community and move out, obviously transient vacationers out of areas and neighborhoods where we don't have the infrastructure to support, that is something that we have to manage back into our core tourism venues where we can better manage that demand.
Right. Love to get into some of that. Maybe if we could, we can jump back to the slides. I'm taking some notes because I want to hit on a couple of those points on the Q&A. But Jerry, maybe we can jump to the next slide if we could.
Sure. And this is also an interesting slide. This is the state of Hawaii saying, hey, we're going to be doing more cuts. And this is what the general feeling is that and of course this is from the chamber. So they did a very good job with this survey, I thought. But 34.6% of the businesses are saying, hey, I'm going to actually cut more than I already have. And then you look to the right and they say, I might not, 17% are basically saying I may not even be here. So who's in the best shape? Who's thinking a little bit more confident? Probably Kauai is in the best shape. They're, at 31% and 12.6% respectively. But I would say the general feeling is that, hey, we're not done. We're going to be looking at more job loss, and boy, at the end of the day, I hope we're going to be here. So that's kind of what this slide shows me, and it's kind of a very scary stat to me.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jerry.
Sure.
Yeah, I want to jump back into some Q&A right now, and yesterday when we were prepping, I want to push this one over to Elliot to start. When the industry was shut down with the shelter in place and the 14-day quarantine, this place became pretty quiet, and we were coming out of, like you said, Jerry and Elliot, a pretty robust environment where Hawaii was taking in a lot of people. We're at that $10 million mark. There's a lot of people who enjoyed that peace and tranquility. And there's a large call out that the industry should change, and the composition of the visitors and the number of visitors that should come back should be less and different. And we had a pretty robust conversation yesterday about some reality and some truth to, how this needs to be approached. And Elliot, can you just talk to that about, what's the reality of a change in industry composition of our visitors? Less, paying more, or is it, we just need to get some back? I think you had some pretty pointed opinions on that.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. And frankly, there were some silver linings, obviously, going out with my family in some of these surf breaks that are just, you'd never be able to get to, or going out to Waikiki Beach and then having it empty and enjoyable is something that was really enjoyable, but unfortunately unsustainable to some degree. But getting to your question, I think to your point, getting to 10 million got a little uncomfortable for a lot. I think one of the key points to that was the TVRs created some perceptions around the industry that was not good because we put populations to spaces that, again, had no infrastructure and support, was not guided, and they got into a lot of different neighborhoods around the whole state where, you're getting to spaces where people got upset and rightfully so. And while I'm not opposed to good, well done, hosted, managed TVRs, when it went unchecked, it caused a problem that now we're having to crawl ourselves back from. So I think that's one thing that we have to put into check, because frankly, we haven't built any more hotels since we built Aulani in 2010, and prior to that was the Iolani in 1988. So from an overall hotel room count, we haven't really taken it up. And frankly, if you look at from, our max out at 8 million, that differential from 8 to approximately 10 or so this past year was a complete function of those rental units coming online. Now, getting back to your point around how do we do this going forward?
Before you go there, Elliot, can you just, a lot of our audience doesn't know what a TBR is and the magnitude of the numbers. Can you just explain what that is and kind of the numbers that
apologize for the acronyms, but transient vacation rental. So it's really someone who's basically looking for a vacation rental. And like I said, I do differentiate it from someone that's hosting it, who's in the house, who does a bed and breakfast, who's managing that occupancy, versus a free-for-all of unmanaged homes that are being rented in neighborhoods that we all, frankly live in. That's the differential. Yeah. And the numbers I talked about really speak to prior to the big run-up in TVRs. We primarily were keeping our industry within the confines of the majority of our industry areas, such as Waikiki, Ko'olina, Turtle Bay, and inside of that infrastructure. Now, they spill out into the islands, into our natural resources, our parks, and all of that. And it's another discussion that I was just gonna dive into for a second.
Let me come back to that, Elliot. I want to jump to Jerry real quick. We got a lot of questions before this event today around kind of travel bubbles and even resort bubbles. Jerry, you seem to be managing an asset that would be perfect for a resort bubble if it's possible. Can you speak to the reality of that, whether it's for visitors coming from out of state or even for staycation type of opportunities for Hawaii residents? What's your thinking around that?
Mike, it's really interesting. We've been talking about this for a couple months now, and there's actually going to be a test in Hawaii pretty soon at the Andaz in Maui. Mike Djokovic is going to have a movie group in there, so we'll be able to look at this thing and really analyze it quite well. But I would say the parameters around doing it are really interesting. A place like Turtle Bay or Aulani, and there is others, are a lot easier to do it, bubbles than say Waikiki, bringing a group into Waikiki, because you really have to do the geofencing part and make sure that everybody is within a certain parameter. Otherwise, there is no bubble. The bubble gets broken. So, you have to do the PCR testing for everybody coming in, and then also your team members, again, so the bubble doesn't break. Sanitation stations, normal, sectioning, elevator, protocols, masks, everything that you would really think of that you need to do. But the main thought is you don't want to break the bubble because it's easy to do. So, do team members need to stay in the hotel as well, in a part of the hotel, or do they go home at night? Because when they come back, what are you going to do? Just temperature testing, and that may not be perfect. And a PCR test at this point takes a couple days. So I would say they need to stay within the compound as well. I think the main thing on bubbles is you have to do the geofencing, as I said, where you cannot go outside of it. The group has to agree to abide by these restrictions. If someone goes out to a bar and then all of a sudden they catch COVID-19 or whatever, they come back, then the whole group is susceptible to it. So,
what's the enforcement on that, Jerry? How do you enforce that?
You know what? You have hotel security. You don't really have police around that really have the badge and can enforce it. So it really is honestly the honor system. And so you know what you're supposed to do, what you're not supposed to do, and the group has to be really on top of making sure that everybody is abiding by the rules. That's really all you can do. because you can't arrest somebody for not doing it. But it gets a lot more involved than this, because if you say that the beach is part of your geofencing, well then you're going to mix with the residents that are there and that kind of thing. So again, that's another thing that can break the bubble. So that doesn't work either. So there's a lot of things that you really have to be. Food and beverage, how do you do that? That's difficult as well. And so we have different protocols around that the hotels have put together. And obviously you have to do that in the bubble as well. So,
Elliot, I didn't really thank you, Jerry. Elliot, I didn't really give you a chance to finish your answer, going back to kind of a more sustainable, both from a mix, in terms of, perhaps less, but higher paying, and something that might be more environmentally friendly. I mean, those are kind of the buzz conversations that are happening out there. Elliot, can you kind of finish your thought to that? And I'll come back to you, Jerry, on some of your thoughts on that.
Sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. I think to your point, I do believe that, I know there's a lot of discussion on diversity around our economy, what sustainable tourism looks like. I do agree that there is some path forward there that we need to continue to look at in earnest. I think that when we look at coming back now, we have to make sure that we acknowledge that we have to get our economy back on its feet. So I don't see us getting to 10 million anytime soon. I don't see us getting to 8 million, really quickly. It's going to be a slow roll up in the next 2 years. But I think what we have to do is we have to support that wholeheartedly and welcome our tourists back. I think we should start to communicate what our expectations of them are, to better align them with what our expectations are on a sustainable model, and how their behavior affects our environment and our people, in a good, positive way, but welcome them back. And I think the community has to get around that in a big way and change that sentiment a little bit, because I know there is a sour taste in the mouth right now, given where we went and where we are now. But I think it's important, because if we don't get our economy at least back on our feet, tourism is going to be part of it, some way, shape, or form. I think we have to manage that narrative, but we need some time. We need some runway to do that. We need to collaborate with private, public, nonprofits to gain that narrative and that storyline about how we want to do it. And then where do we diversify? The university system, biosciences, ocean. We have a lot of opportunities out there, but it's going to take time. In that time, we're going to have an economy that's viable, and that's going to be tourism in the short term. And then, how can we bring diversity back into the storyline? But more importantly, I think right now is what is our message out there to our markets and distribution channels about who we want to be, first of all, being safe. And then, it's going to be an all-in deal, because the behavior of our guests coming into the state is going to be critical as well. So we're going to have to lead with those expectations of safety, and then hopefully a good synergetic way of having tourism here where everybody can be supporting it and sustainable, is the way I'm looking at it. I don't have all the answers. I don't think anyone does, but at least it's a way out so that everybody understands the path, and more planning and I think is necessary on that front.
Jerry, any thoughts on that?
No, I think he's spot on. I think, I think his answer is just perfect. I don't have really anything to add onto that, Michael.
I want to go back to one of the slides. Joanne, if you can go back to the slide deck, and it's the slide that has the bars that show people's sentiment coming back in kind of late 2021, vertical bars back right there. Nope, right there. This is catastrophic for us. When you look at the needs of our government to generate tax revenue, this bar in December 2021's got to move up quickly. There's a catastrophic lineup of the need for us to generate revenue for our state, to support our community, not to mention start getting employment back to us. How do we convey to the leaders of our community, the reality that is in front of us if we don't come together and find a way to, at the end of the day, convince the community that we move that bar up. Jerry, you want to take that on?
Sure. You know, obviously we really have to, because there's so much at stake here. When I said earlier, really, that, you know, 1 out of 2 families are directly affected. This is only going to get worse and worse and worse unless we can find some way to get started to move the curve, as Elliot so articulately said. It is so important that we can find a way to get this whole movement started again and get tourism back to a point, not only of profitability. That is not even the most important thing. It's getting people back to work and getting paychecks in their hand and that kind of thing, and doing it as quickly as we possibly can. What we're looking at right now, and I'll go through the glide path in a little bit, it's a very, very slow glide. And
and Jerry, I'll just add to that, if you don't mind, as I think, you know, I honestly believe wholeheartedly in our brand and in Hawaii. I honestly believe that we can manage this narrative better than any other destination in the world. We're an island state. We have everything going for us here, and we can actually manage it to move these bars to the left. If we can just get a few things moving forward, that is critical to our success in getting, you know, I went through it all. I'm not going to repeat myself, but I believe we do have it in our control to move this left in a meaningful and safe way, with obviously the well-being of our community being paramount. But I do believe we have that opportunity.
Yeah, and you have the team in place to do it. I mean, you have some of the best hotel operators in the world. You have some of the best hotels. We have the greatest treasures in the world. I mean, to add to what Elliot was saying, with the different islands, they're so diverse, beautiful, and we have the best people in the world. The 1.3 million people or so that are in Hawaii are incredible. The spirit, everything. We just need to move tourism into a better light and start getting people here.
You know, Ellie, you touched on something that's very relevant, and earlier you did as well, Jerry, that what this slide tells us is that, you know, absent right now, even if we were to open, it's not like a bunch of people would come back. You know, we first have to control our own environment, number one, make it a safe environment for the people of Hawaii so that we can convince the world that we're a safe place. And then secondly, in order to move this bar, that may not be the solution for us in its entirety. In order to move this bar forward, we're going to have to convince them and market to them that they can come here, which is the marketing dollars that both of you spoke to. Yeah. That source of income is the TAT, which is something that it's not getting much activity right now. So maybe talk to that a little bit, Jerry, or Elliot, either one of you.
I would just say a couple of things, and I'll hand it off to Jerry. But I think there's a couple pieces in there that are critical. One is, to your point, our environment here, that contact tracing piece, it bodes huge as far as the community confidence and from a market confidence in coming here and creating a safe environment. And the pre-test prior to vaccine is critical. So that expenditure of funds that should be putting into that space right now, parallel of what we're doing to try to change the behaviors of our own community to become a safe destination, I think is critical. Those things need to be happening in parallel to move this bar up. And then secondly, I believe there are funds sitting to do exactly that, to market. Currently, we're not generating, but I believe there's reserve. If I'm not mistaken, Jerry, and you can confirm this. But we do have funds available to market fairly immediately as soon as we have that glide path. Because before putting any money in the market, we want some kind of confidence that those two other pieces are critical, right? That we bend the curve, contact tracing, pre-testing, and then we can go out and market a very confident message to our internal stakeholders, our community, our employees, and the marketplace.
Yeah, to your point, Elliot, there is dry powder there. You know, we have right now on hold reserve. Obviously, we're not going to use it now. We have about $40 million or so. So there is some money there that will be well spent quickly as we move forward.
Yeah, I want to change the conversation a little bit, and it's in an area that you folks both have a tremendous amount of experience in. We have a new leader at the Hawaii Tourism Authority, John DeFries. He's following up behind a solid industry professional in Chris Tatum, that I think everybody thought was high capacity. We have a new leader coming in, different set of skill sets. What's the first advice you give this leader coming into his spot over the next 30 days?
I'll tell you, I think John is a tremendous human being, first of all, and he is, I think he's the right person for the right time here with us. And I will tell you the one thing that I think, and John has this skill, is to get people together and talk. I mean, there's a lot of silos out there right now with the different branches of government, for sure, with different groups, that kind of thing. And John's not going to go for that. He's going to get people together. He's going to put them in a room, and he's going to have them talk and come up with solutions. And I think that that is what he should do right at the beginning, and kind of, you know, get this whole plan finally put together and start moving it out so that we as a hospitality industry have the pillars all set up and we can move forward together. And I think that's what John's going to do. I bet that's what he's thinking about right now.
Yeah. Elliot, your thoughts?
You know, I couldn't agree with Jerry more, and frankly, I know John well. I have a lot of confidence in him. I think he's going to be a collaborator and a convener, and push exactly the agenda that I think Jerry and I have been talking about here today. But I have a lot of confidence in him. I'm looking forward to working with him as well.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys' comments. I share those sentiments and look forward to his leadership. I want to get back into the industry side, both, you know, on your folks' property, and I'll start with you, Elliot. I mean, the way in which your assets and your hotels are going to have to operate is going to be much different. I mean, the safety of your employees being, you know, number one. You've spoken to that. Talk to kind of the mechanics of that and what that means for the industry, what that means. As you say, you're affecting, you know, half of our population, you know, in terms of being touched by the industry, and those protocols are going to affect their families in some way. Maybe talk through the depth of that a little bit.
Yeah, no question. I think what we've done, to be honest with you, Mike, and fortunately here in Hawaii, it's a really tight-knit group of industry leaders that we have. So we normally, even when we go out to market, we market Hawaii first. We don't go out and market our particular resorts first. And we took, I think, the same approach with regard to how we set up the protocols in general, so that as a brand in Hawaii, we come strong with these protocols are going to be set forth for all resorts. When people come to Hawaii, they don't have to guess about what hotel is going to be doing what, for the most part. And I'm not going to speak for everybody, but in general, we've had a lot of discussions along with the HTLA, and also took CDC guidance around, okay, what is best practice? What is required? How do we go about it? And I think there's a couple key points, and I'll try to keep it short, Micah, but I think first and foremost, the communication is critical. Right, so we have to be sure that our cast members coming in, our employees coming in, are trained, taking the time to go through that to make sure that they understand the expectations, the safety protocols. I think getting more granular, talking about what we all are going to be doing, but obviously temperature checks is a basic coming in and out of the resort. I think protocols around gaining as much touchless approaches to the interactions with our guests as possible. So if you're talking about direct to room check-in, contactless payments, mobile order for F&B, those types of things. And then core detailed principles around cleanliness within the room and public areas that are audited to make sure that it is actually getting executed. And then putting up basic barriers, right, and the basic PPE of face covering, social distancing, that is all being incorporate into our protocols and our training as we prepare, as we all prepare to open hopefully one day soon. But it is definitely not taken lightly. I think we've all are sharing best practices across our brands and definitely across Hawaii. And we're definitely prepared and have a lot of confidence in being prepared for our guests to come in when the time is right and when it is absolutely safe for our employees to come back.
Jerry, you got anything else you want to add to that?
Just to jump on those good thoughts, you know, we need to do also the same thing from the airports to the taxi, to the buses, to all our activities that we have, and they have to do a great job and a consistent job, just like I'm very confident that, as Elliot was talking about, that the hotels will do. I mean, we all have our flag protocols, but we all also have agreed with AHLA and HLTA that we work within a certain set of protocols as well. And let me tell you, Micah, they're very good. I've gone through about 6 to 7 of the different flag protocols, and they are all excellent. But it's really interesting. You know, our whole lives we were training our team members, our cast members, as Elliot says, to engage with people and talk to people and tell them about the AINA and tell them about our culture here and all this wonderful things that we have. And now we're kind of telling them in this COVID age that they're going to have to disengage and not be as close and not be, up close and in your face as kind of we were before. So it's going to be a whole new way of life for our teams when they come in, and we retrain them before we open. I'm sure that it's going to be, at least a couple of weeks training with each individual hotel for the different protocols and that kind of thing. So,
Mike, I would add one other thing that I just throw in there. I think it is equally important, I think, and I mentioned this earlier, but I'll just reemphasize it, is that we communicate with our guests, because the properties that they have used to known and how we operate is going to be quite different, at least in the short term. And I think understanding what their behaviors and expectations of how they behave within our space to respect the safety of our cast members and our employees is going to be critical. So I think we're going to really put our best foot forward to positively put a spin on how that expectation is going to be, to be responsible for themselves as they come into Hawaii and come into our resorts and so forth. That is be a critical part of our communication marketing program.
And the third leg of the stool there too, I'm sorry to interrupt, is the resident. They have to know what we're doing as well. We need to communicate to the residents so they have confidence in bringing the tourists in and feeling good about them here.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to ask a last question, and then I'll tie it off. And it's probably one of the most important questions that I'm going to ask. We've got a lot of young people, who need jobs, who are coming out of college, some coming out of high school. They're thinking about, their career. Many of them would like to get into the hospitality industry to make it part of their lives as in a way that it's had an impact on both of your lives. What do you tell these young people?
I will tell you it's obvious that there's going to be some absorption, right? Because of the layoffs and that kind of thing that are occurring right now. And as we've said, the glide path is going to be a few years. However, we have some great schools here. Scheidler has a great hotel school. We can be creative. There's things that we don't do well here, like ecotourism. We can start looking at those things. We can look at ag tourism. There's a lot of things that we can do to start, bringing in these kids that are graduating now. We need to stay in touch with them. We need to give them hope that, this industry in Hawaii is going to come back. It may not be 10.4 million strong, but I think we'll be 7.5 to 8 in 2.5, 3 years again. And if they can begin in maybe even a line position like I did when I started in the industry and work your way up that kind of thing, and people are willing to do that, then that's a great thing. But I think we got to give them hope and encouragement that something good is going to happen. It's not that far away. Be patient.
Yeah,
Elliot, final words?
Yeah, I build on that actually, Mike, and say that I think the number one thing is to stay positive. I think you can't lose faith. You have to stick with it. I think obviously if there's opportunity to continue education and to grow that depth while we wait is probably the best advice I would probably give to someone that is either in college, graduating from college, or going into college, coming out of high school. And then secondly, I think that, over time, we really haven't had a huge draw, frankly, from our local graduates into the obviously leadership or salaried realms of the industry. And I think with the Travel Industry Management School going over to Shiloh just recently this past year, I think that's going to open up a lot of doors with regard to development in that space. And we hope as an industry to get more involved. They've been in an interim space for a long time, and I'm very optimistic that we can engage in that space with the high schoolers and kind of dig a little deeper into sharing what we do as an industry with our people here and drafting from our local high schools and colleges to create further depth and diversity within our pool of leaders and employees here within the industry. So it's going to be a while. Patience is going to be critical, but I just say keep positive, keep enthusiastic, keep the faith, keep educating yourselves, and we'll be back probably stronger than ever with what we're learning out of this.
Well, on behalf of the Hawaii Community Foundation, Ohana, all of our donors, our supporters, I want to thank the two of you folks for taking your time. This was a lot of time out of your schedule to prepare and then to come in and present, put yourselves out there publicly to answer some pretty tough questions. Really want to thank you guys for being here. I also want to thank our viewers who are out there and our donors. As I mentioned early on, we just wouldn't be here without you. We took a couple steps forward and we're taking a couple steps backward. We're going to have to reset ourselves. We've got a lot of work in front of us as a community. I think we're all confident that these are issues that we can overcome if we put our heads together and we think unconditionally about the future of Hawaii. So on that, everybody have a great weekend. Have a good Labor Day break, I hope. Shelter in place, be safe, wear your mask, and aloha, everyone. And again, Elliot and Jerry, thank you for your folks' presence. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Mike.